Hi, I am Robin Colucci, and I help world-class experts write world-changing books. And today I am presenting on how to vet your book idea. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen. Okay, so if you have been thinking about writing a book, it's very likely that you've had many ideas come to you, and maybe you're struggling with how should I focus my book? Is this, where would I start? Is this idea even a book? And so the purpose of our session today is to give you some tools to help you figure out, first of all, is the idea that you have a book worthy one? Does it make sense for you to write it? And then how do you go about thinking about the idea so that you can transform that idea into a clear, saleable concept for a book that could actually be published that people would want to buy and read. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we want to do is start to think about what would having this book in the world look like? How would it impact you and your life and your branding and your messaging and who you're talking to, what you're talking about? And because a lot of times things happen, if people are telling you a lot of times, oh, you should write a book, sometimes that's around maybe something that you went through, some difficult challenge or transformation in your life where you struggled and overcame something. And sometimes those stories can really make a great book. But the question that you want to ask yourself before you leap in and start writing about an experience, particularly a difficult one, is how do you want to be known, right? So sometimes we go through things and overcome them, and the fact that we overcame that challenge actually becomes part of our brand and part of our mission and part of our messaging. Other times we go through things that really have nothing to do with any of that. And while it's an interesting story or maybe even a titillating story, it's not necessarily a story that we want to be known by. So another way, so that could be one disqualifier, that if you don't want to be known by the topic that you're thinking would be an idea for your book, then you don't want to write that book. Another way of looking at this is, say you have a hobby that you're really great at and you know a lot about, and some of your friends had said, you should write a book about that. You know so much about that. Well, again, you want to ask yourself, how do I want to be known? Right? Do I want to be known as a parachuting expert, or do I want to be known as a cybersecurity expert, which is my core business and the thing I talk about the most? So you always want to be weighing, does the idea line up with how you want the world to see you? If the answer is yes, we can go on to the next question. If it's no, then congratulations, you don't have to write a book about that. Okay, so the next question is, what do you intend to do with the book once it's out? This is something that unfortunately a lot of people don't give enough thought to before they start writing the book. A lot of people who end up self-publishing don't even think about it as they're publishing the book. And what happens when you don't give this question enough consideration is you end up with a book and in your hands, maybe a couple thousand of them in your garage, and you have no idea what you're doing with it, or who's going to read it, or why, or how you want to share about it. And one of my literary agent friends has a great saying, and it's, if no one reads your book, did you really write one? Right? And so it's not just about writing the book, it's not just about publishing the book, it's about what do you see yourself doing with the book so that people get to find out about it, so people get to read about it. And does it make sense for you in your real life to put the time and energy in to make all of that happen. So again, I work primarily in the nonfiction space. So what I'm talking about here mainly is writing a book, a nonfiction book that relates to some kind of expertise that you have or some kind of experience that you've had. And so when we think about it that way, something that a lot of my clients do is they're writing a book that directly relates to their business or their mission, right? Something to do with their personal mission in life. And so they will be on the ground sharing about this book, making sure that people know about it and are reading it. And that's really what it takes for a book to live in the world. So you can bring a book into the world, but if you abandon it at that point, it literally will die. People talk about the effort of writing the book. That's analogous to being pregnant. When the book is published, that's analogous to having a newborn. And if you want the book to thrive, you've got to feed it, care for it, nurture it, and keep giving it attention. And that's the only thing that really makes a book thrive in the world. So what is your vision for what you would do with the book once it's out? If your vision is, I don't want to do anything with the book once it's out, I just want it to be out, then again, that would be a disqualifier to write the book, unless you just want to do it, because you want to do it, which is fine, but we're talking about vetting a saleable book idea. So I would say that would make it a no. So here's another one that's tied to the other two, but it's still its own question, which is this topic, is this book idea something you'd be excited to lead a conversation about for at least the next 5 years? One of the greatest things about books is their long shelf life. It's probably where the idea of a shelf life even came into being, because a book's shelf life can literally be hundreds of years. And so if it's not something that you see yourself being excited to talk about for at least 5 years after it comes out, it's probably not a great book idea to commit to, because it's the process of thinking through the book, writing the book, getting the book published, either whether it's traditional or self-published, is typically going to be a minimum of 6 months if you self-publish. It could be up to 24 months if you traditionally publish, depending on what your publisher's schedule is for when they want your book to be released. So think about that. You're going to put a lot of time and effort into creating it. If you say to yourself, yes, I totally want to be leading this conversation, not just casually participating, but leading this conversation for at least the next 5 years. And if you have that level of passion, then maybe this book idea would make sense for you. Then the next question is there an audience for this topic? Now, what do I mean by an audience? Well, it's how many potential readers do you have? Now, the bar is different for a self-published author versus a traditionally published author. So obviously, if you're wanting a book deal with a publishing house and that you want them to give you a nice big check for an advance on royalties, you have to have a bigger audience than if you self-publish. So the bar is a little different depending on your vision. So if your vision is to have a traditional book deal, you really need to know that there's millions of potential readers for this topic. If you're self-publishing, maybe you don't need to know that there's millions of people in a potential audience, but you want to know that there is some audience. So there are some topics that maybe are so minute. It's interesting because I think these days with our connected world and how, reaching our audience is no longer limited to a neighborhood or even our nation. So, we really have a potential audience of 7 billion people, right? Nearly 7 billion people. Not everyone is internet. But so it really has broadened the horizon of what a substantial audience could be. And, but again, some topics still are just so minute and maybe so specialized to something of your particular interest that maybe there's just not enough people that would also be interested to make it a saleable book idea. So again, that's, I'd say out of all of these, that's probably the least likely to be a concern, but it's definitely something you want to consider before you commit. And then finally, it's, do you have or are you willing to acquire enough content? So sometimes we get a book idea and we realize that it's something that's of interest to us that we'd like to explore. But then the question becomes, well, how deeply do you want to explore it? And are you willing to do the research to come up with enough content to really execute and deliver on the promise of your book concept? And again, you can see how all of these connect, right? Because if you're writing something that's in your existing area of expertise, if you're writing something that you can leverage to grow your brand and your business, if you're writing something that you're drawing upon a body of work that you've already developed over several, years or decades, then you probably have almost all the content that you need. And this would be an easy yes. But if you're thinking of writing a book about something that's more of a curiosity to you, or something that you've dabbled in, or something that you're just getting started, this is the time to really ask yourself the question, am I willing to knuckle down and actually get this content and understand it deeply enough to be able to write an effective book? Okay, so if your answers to these questions are telling you that this book idea is a yes, then we get to go on to the next series, a couple of questions. So from that point, the next thing we're thinking about is, okay, so now we know this is a book idea I'm willing to commit to. This is about something that I want to be known for. I have the willingness, or I already have the content that I need. This is something a lot of people are interested in. So we've checked all the boxes. Now we've got to look at, how do we take this idea and flesh it out and frame it into what I call the clear, saleable concept. And so a clear, saleable concept has 3 basic traits, and I'm going to go into each one in detail. So the first is that it must be aligned with you. So this means that you're writing a book on a topic with a point of view that is a match for your values, for your mission, for what you want to create in the world, and this is really important, for what you want to create in your own life. My philosophy on writing a book is probably a little bit different than even some other coaches or other people who help people write books. And my philosophy for writing a book is that the book should be viewed as fuel for the engine. It is not the engine, right? So a book is something that can help propel your mission forward, but the book itself should never be considered the main thing. The book itself is not the mission. The book is a vehicle, is an enhancer to help drive and give momentum to the mission. And so when we think about that, we really want to make sure that the book topic and the effort that it takes to keep that book in the world, the effort that it takes to lead that conversation consistently for at least the next 5 years, all of those things that we just covered, we want to make sure it's all aligned with the direction that you're trying to go in your own life. So a lot of times I work with people who might be wanting to do some sort of a pivot or an evolution in their own brand and their own work. And so a book can help them make that transition successfully by signaling their audience that they're entering a new conversation, or they're entering an old conversation in a new way. So that can work very effectively. Or say you're already on message and you just want to go to the next level, or you want to really be able to scale your impact and reach a broader audience. Maybe you've been sharing this information inside of your own silo, inside of your own area of expertise with your colleagues, and you recognize a tremendous potential value add by bringing that information out of your silo and into the mass market, where it can be utilized on a much larger scale and benefit millions and millions of lives. And that's what you want to do. That would be a good example of a book, of an idea that's aligned with you on every level. And so asking those questions I just presented will get you very close to that. But I would even invite you to envision, what does your life look like a year after this book is out, 5 years after this book is out? What does success look like to you in relation to your book? Because that end game will shape every aspect of your book. It will infuse every line that you write. And so it's so important to think of this before you begin to write, because it's a lot easier to get it right that way than to wing it and then try to retrofit your vision to match the book that you wrote. And I've watched people do exactly that, who just launched out on their own and started to write without thinking through these things, and then ended up with a book and they had no idea what to do with it, and they didn't even feel connected to it. And that's like, to me, a tragedy, because I want you, when you write your book and your book is out, I want you to be in love with that book for the rest of your life. And I want that book to have a life beyond yours. And so this is how you do that. So make sure it's aligned with you. The next trait of the clear, saleable concept is we've got to bring your audience into the picture. So your clear, saleable concept also has to match your ideal reader, and not only match what they value, not only match that they might think your mission is really cool. It's got to go deeper than that. It's got to be a match for your ideal reader. And here's the kicker. I want you to pay attention. And what they already know they want. Now, this is very different than what you know that they need. And a lot of times when you're really good at what you do and you know it inside and out, it's so easy to want to go straight to, okay, here's what you need to do, right? I mean, I do it all the time. I just can't wait to tell people how, this is what you do. This is going to be great, right? So, but what you really want to think about is, what is the problem that my reader is already aware that they have? And you've got to meet them there, because you are always going to be farther down the road than they are. So you've got to meet them where they are. And then when you can communicate effectively to your potential reader, I get you. I know where you are. I know what's keeping you up at night. I know what's frustrating you. I'm going to demonstrate that by communicating this. And I have a way out. So here's where you are, reader. Here's where you want to be. See this gap? My book is going to help you cross that gap. But if you don't meet them where they are and communicate that you understand the problem, they won't listen to the solution until you show them that. So it's about thinking about and getting really clear about what does your ideal reader already know they need, or they want, really, because they don't actually, if they knew what they needed, they'd have solved the problem that your book is going to help them solve, so they wouldn't need your book. So your ideal reader actually just knows what they want. And so that's where we want to connect. Now, a good way to do this is to think of someone, either you know personally or maybe you don't know, but that you would think this person would hugely benefit from my book. And you want to really tune in and ask and imagine, what is this, what's going on inside this person in terms of like, what would lead them to seek the information that I want to share in my book? What would be a problem that they would be facing that my book could help them solve? And why does it matter to them? If you're a consultant or a coach, or you're doing any kind of service work with, specific individuals, the easy way to do this is just think of one of your best clients, right? And this is interesting. Like, you don't actually have to necessarily talk to them, because on a deeper level, you actually know, because of the communication that you have had. You just might not have attuned to the awareness. So one thing I do with my clients is I actually have them imagine that their ideal reader in the room with them, and almost do like a Gestalt kind of a exercise where they're asking that reader these questions about what matters to them, and what's what is in the way of them. What do they want? What do they think is in the way of what they want? Why do they think they don't have it? What are their hopes, dreams, fears, those kinds of things. Because like anything, books are bought the same way anything gets purchased, which is we buy with our emotion and we justify it with intellect. So when we're talking about a match for your ideal reader, I don't want you to focus on how old your reader is, or how much money your reader makes, or how much education they have. I want you to focus on what they want, what they are frustrated about, what they're worried about, what they care about, because that's actually what's going to lead them to buy your book. Then they'll tell themselves, oh, I'm going to learn, this is great, I'm going to learn some new skills. That's the justification with intellect. It's not why they bought the book, though. Okay, so moving on. So let's say you've got it aligned with you, you know who your ideal reader is, and you know what they're looking for. The next one is the clear saleable concept has to be unique in the marketplace. Now, before you close the Facebook Live, or before you close this recording and run for the hills, because this is terrifying, if you're having that feeling of like, oh no, there's no way this is going to be unique. There's so many people who've written about my topic. There's so many books out there. This is never going to work. I want to stop you right now and tell you to take a deep breath, because you absolutely can find this. Your book concept, there is a unique nugget in there. There is something in there. I don't care how much a topic has been written about. I've helped people find this who write about dating and relationships. I've helped people find this who write about health and fitness and how to lose fat. Okay. So I mean, talk about overly written, right? I mean, things that have just been written about over and over and over. So you have your unique nugget, and the process of figuring that out is you've got to look and see what else is already being said and what else is out there. And I've got to tell you, I've worked with people at all levels of experience, expertise, income, it doesn't matter. Everyone gets a little nervous about this, right? Everyone thinks, oh my gosh, like I have to compare myself to some of the most successful authors in the marketplace. I've got to compare my concept to that. And I'm saying, yes. And here's the beautiful thing is that in every case, you will find that nugget. And when you do, you will receive a boost in two very important things that you can't get any other way. And those are your confidence in yourself and the validity of your book concept and your commitment to getting it out. The confidence will come because you'll recognize that whatever that special thing is that you have to add to this conversation is something that none of the other experts have addressed. You will know that if you were stuck on a panel with the top 5 authors in your area of expertise, you would have something to add to that conversation of value that would actually put a light bulb over the head of everyone else on that panel. And then you will have a deeper commitment because you will know that if you're not going to share this insight that you have to bring to the table, they aren't going to share it either. And that means that your ideal reader who's suffering in the gap will never receive that value that they need because it's locked up in you in the book that's not done. So it's important to do this, right? And here's how you do it. Now, I used to do this as a field trip to a bookstore, but we are in the middle of a pandemic. So bookstores are harder to get to, and a lot of them aren't open, or you can only go in, a couple people at a time, and it can be very, very difficult. So I have my COVID-19 book comps hack, is what I call it. And really, the way that you do this is you've got to look for, well, what are the books, the relevant books in the market about that if I were, think of it this way. So you want to think to yourself, if I were my ideal reader and I was looking for the solution to the problem that I know that my book is going to solve, I'm going to look for my book, your book, right? Your book would be their ideal solution. Imagine if they were looking for your book, they won't find it because you haven't written it yet. So what would they find? What would they find instead? And if they had to cobble together some sort of Frankenstein solution to try to get as close as they could to the solution that your book is going to present, which 5 books might they buy that would get them the closest? Once you identify what those books are, and I will show you the hack, I'll explain to you how to do it. Once you identify what those 5 books are, then you want to look at each one and ask yourself some questions about them. Now, you don't have to buy all the books to do this. Reading reviews is a good way to see like what other people have said about the books can tell you a lot. Looking at the table of contents can tell you a lot. Reading the back cover copy, reading the introduction, or whatever the look inside is going to let you see. Or you can buy the books. And frankly, I'm an advocate of buying books, obviously. And if it's some of the top books in your subject matter area, it couldn't hurt to have them if you don't already, right? A couple of criteria is you want to pick recent books, ideally books that were published within the last 5 years, really ideally in the last 3. And again, you want to try to search for that closest match. So here's how I do it, because going to a bookstore is difficult. What you want to do is you want to go to your Google, probably, search or whatever search engine you're using, and you just type in best books on, and then you put your subject, and then you put in 2020 for the year, right? Best books on dieting 2020, best books on leadership 2020, whatever it is, type that in and you'll get results. Then you can start to look through those. You'll see them all at the top of the bar. You'll see a little thumbnail image of each book, and you want to start looking through those. And some of them you'll be able to discard right away. You'll be like, no, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. And then maybe you come up with a short list of like 10 that you can then go look up on Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com or Goodreads or wherever you want to look to try to get a better sense of what's in that book and how relevant a comp it is. Once you've picked your top 5, and I want to add too, if there haven't been a ton of books written on your subject matter, 3 is also okay. But don't do more than 5. Just really try to narrow it down to 5 or it gets confusing. So pick your top 5 and then make sure that they all were published within the last 3 to 5 years. Sometimes those searches will come up with older books. So just be aware of the year it was published. Ideally, you're going to pick books that were traditionally published because the traditional publishers still do determine what the market says is important, and because they are the market, they have the bulk of the market share still. So you want to focus on traditionally published books. Typically, the ones that come up in that kind of a search, though, would qualify as that. And then you want to ask yourself, what are the strengths of this book? What is this book doing really well? What are the strengths of the author, right? What's the author bringing to the table that's really helpful and useful? And then you want to do the opposite and you want to look at the weaknesses, right? So what about this book content is weak, or what's missing here? Because that, when you start to look at that for each book, that's when you're going to start to see the lens or the frame that you can put around your information so that people can recognize that you have something new and of value to share. So when you ask yourself, what's missing from this book that my book is going to have? And you want to be taking notes on all of this so that you can compare your notes later, because you want to do this for each of the 5 books. And then, of course, you also, if you might even find that there's weaknesses that the author's presenting, like maybe their voice sounds really dry or impersonal, or sometimes very egotistical and it's just kind of off-putting. So I think it's also good to note those things, because then you can kind of check yourself, right? And make sure, well, if I found that annoying, maybe other readers, maybe my ideal reader would find that annoying also. And so you can also use that as a way to just inform your, what kind of tone you want to take in your own book. So when we're looking at, okay, what's great about the content, what's weak about the content, what's great about the author, what's weak about the author, you're going to do that for each of the 5 books. And then we're almost there. Then you want to take all of that together and you say to yourself, okay, so if I'm thinking of everything I compared with all 5 of these books, with all 5 of these authors, and all of their concepts, what is the main thing that they're missing that I have to share, that I'm excited to share? And you'll see it. When you see it, here, there's one more thing. There's a test that you want to, your final test to know, do I have a clear saleable concept? Is you want to be able to complete the sentence, this is the first book to, and then whatever that outcome is if you can say that this is the first book to demonstrate XYZ, or to teach how to do X so that you can have Y, then you know that you've got your clear saleable concept, and we can say this book idea has now been vetted, has been validated, and we are ready to start thinking about the outline and what are those talking points that you want to be sure to cover. Okay, so there you have it.